Hello and welcome to today's PermaPuheet, the PermaTalks. Today's topic is water in every of the permaculture zones, and our teacher today is Aline VaMo. She will take us on a tour through all the permaculture zones and identify water patterns, and then we will see how to use the findings within our homes. Aline, I hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic, and thanks everybody who is here and has an interest in the topic because I find it really well. It's probably currently very hot topic here where I am right now. We live in Catalonia. And since a week or two, we have phase one of a emergency situation called we are now in a severe drought in our area. So this is a topic that we've been working with for a good few years now because we saw it coming as good permaculture designers. It was like on its way. And although, of course, we always design systemically and whole or integral projects, our company's name is also La Casa Integral, so the integrated systems are always part of any of our designs, but we seemingly have found a niche in water design, both for landscape and for domestic water. So this is what I would like to share some of our experiences on with you today. I have prepared a small presentation. So if you're happy to just follow along, I'll go through it and I might be going very quickly, or I might be skipping over links and names and images that you see that you don't fully understand. Of course, there is always the recording to go back to. But also, if there is a need to actually have a better understanding of anything that passes, Dominic has kindly offered to watch the chat. So you can just type in any questions you may have and I'll stop and I'll just come to the question right there and then. So no worries about speaking up. Okay, so let me find the presentation for you. There we go. So water. This is a slide that I like starting with. Mni Wichoni, water is life. It goes a few years back now to 2015-16. Some of you may know what happened at Standing Rock and what this photo means. All nations, we should all stand together and protect our water because water is indeed life. And the photo on the back, on the bottom right here, shows what the threat was. It was actually, in this particular case, the American government wanting to put in a pipeline underneath the Missouri River and through sacred CU grounds, and a lot of other native people came to the Standing Rock campsite and all stood there together in favor of water because we need to protect the water because water is life indeed. It's like, I think there is no living organism on this planet that does not have a part of water, and so that's why we can actually state water is life. We depend on water, and if you want to know more about this event in particular, you can search online with the hashtag no DAPL North Dakota pipeline, and you will find the story of the people at Standing Rock. So any permaculture design starts with, okay, what do we have? What is the situation? What are we designing for? So if we are designing for the water layer, then first we need to know where is all the water? What is the water that is available to us? What type of water? What quality of water? And when we look at all of the water on the planet, which is of course a lot, we could actually call it the blue planet, then we see that 97 and a half maybe of all the water is salt water. And 2.5% only is fresh water. So that would be, this big drop would represent all of the water on the planet, and this small little drop would be the fresh water. Why is there a difference? Because of course we can't straight up drink or use to cultivate our food the salt water. It is a totally different ecosystem. We depend on fresh water. And then this little drop here, that small little drop of fresh water, how is that divided up? Well, lots of it is in the ice caps. They are getting smaller, but for now, luckily, there is still a lot of water locked up in those ice caps, protecting us as well from heating up with the albedo effect, etc. And a lot of that water is underground, deep aquifer water that we probably should not be getting to. So that is like under a covered crust, and we call these the deep aquifers. So that leaves us with a very, very thin line, minimum amount of fresh water that is actually available to us, and this is called the superficial water. So this is in rainwater, in rivers, and in shallow aquifers. Now, why do I go back to this knowledge, which is maybe common knowledge, or I would like to think so, that this is something that we learn in high school and that we are aware of? But sometimes I feel that in particular governments should try to keep this in mind when they are trying to solve problems like here, for example, in Catalonia, where we have a drought and where the administration in the last few days has gotten a beating on the social media because their latest marketing campaign states that Catalonia is not dependent on the rain, and by 2030 they will cover more than half of their water needs by desalinating the seawater. I find it actually sad that this is the top techno solution that local governments are going to, rather than trying to restore the hydrological natural cycle, because this is possible. We can actually live within this water, although it is a very thin stripe, and also, of course, acknowledging that there is ever more people on the planet. So looking at these lines, the world is needing more water as the years go by, because of course there is ever more people, and this thin line of water is not going to get more. So when you compare it to other resources that we use, like for example soil or the sun, they are both renewable resources. Well, the sun is there and it's going to be there for quite a while yet. Not maybe as in limitless. There will be a date when also the sun says, goodbye, that was my show. But for now, we've got quite a long stretch of sun to go. And soil, we can actually renew soil. We can cultivate soil. But water, fresh water, we cannot make water. And although there is a saying like you can't make this out of thin air, and yes, you can actually get water out of the air, but it is always the same amount of water, the same amount of fresh water that keeps cycling back. Not so for the population. The population is going up. So the water use, the water needs, we have basic needs as a population that is going up. So water use is going up. We need to make do with what we have. How are we going to tackle this challenge? We already have a bit of a water crisis happening. This is data from already a few years back, but and the provision is that it's going to get worse, and we see a lot of dark colors already on this map. So water stress is high to extremely high in a lot of countries already, and not so much in like desert areas, although of course part of the desert here is also under water stress, but some of these areas are actually better equipped to deal with water that they have, or they have less demand because there is less agriculture and less industry in these zones. Some of the areas that have the darkest colors, they are actually areas where there is the most industry or agriculture happening. So when we look at water cycles, there's the natural water cycle, and then we see that there has been some disruption taking place. These images are from Rosemary's book, the latest Earth Restorer's Guide to Permaculture. On the left, we have the natural water cycle, which maybe you are familiar with, you know, the typical landscape where the water evaporates from above the sea and then it flows inland and rains out above the mountains. From the mountain streams, the water connects through the land back with the sea, and the cycle is happy and full of life. Humanity came along, and we have a anthropogenic water cycle on the right. And I shouldn't say humanity in general came along, because for many years, humanity has actually been perfectly fine living in balance, in harmony. Native peoples all over the world still do, but it is actually the industrialization and maybe also the agricultural revolution already that started making things a bit like fragile. So on the right we see like things like agriculture and monocultures and industry and contamination, and there's other images that I show you later that will make it even clearer that there is a very harsh influence coming from all of this human activity in the developed countries. So this is an image of a restored water cycle by Water Stories. They're doing a lot of work and sharing a lot of resources in English and Spanish. They're trying to open the community to many people. So if you feel passionate about water, I invite you to also go and visit their community. And of course, it is possible. So we can get back to restoring the water cycle in all of its half cycles and full cycles. And so it's amazing to see, as soon as we work with nature, as we are trying to do in permaculture design, how abundant life is and starts springing up again all around any water body that we are to implement in the landscape. So again, we're learning about water. We're wanting to work with nature rather than against it. So we have now revisited how much water do we have, where is it, how many people are there. We could also go into what are the basic needs for our personal hygiene. And more than that, what are actually the properties of water? If we're working with water, how does water move through the landscape? Does it only go down with gravity, or are there also moments where water can actually go up or sideways? And the Amoeba sisters, they're a funky couple of sisters who are online and sharing educational videos with us. And I think sometimes it's just more fun to revisit academic content by fun videos or any sort of material that can help us to actually retain the information, because I feel it's important to intimately get to know the element that we are working with. So I recommend you go and check out this video, The Properties of Water with the Amoeba sisters, and in particular the image that is in this photo, in this slide, talks of course about the hydrogen bridge and how this makes it possible for water to move in other directions than only downhill, because it can actually go up through the trunk of a tree or through the stem of a plant. And water is also energy. The work of Victor Schauberger, who also speaks to half water cycles and full water cycles, the biotic pump. It's very interesting to go and read up on that and to learn more about how life is based on water, but how water itself is also alive. And then Emoto on the right side would also agree that water is alive, because if you talk to it, it will respond. And there is the study, there's a lot of critique on it, of course, as well, that shows the beautiful crystals that are formed in water when you say words of appreciation and love to a water body or to water in a bottle or a glass. And if you shout hatred and negativity at it, it will make ugly, funky crystals. So water is the base of life, but water is also alive. And because of this, Vandana Shiva wrote a book already quite some years ago about how water is so important to us that we will see wars over water. And actually, some of the wars that have already taken place in our lifetime might well have been based already around the element at the base of all life. So we must look after the water. It is our life depends on it. So never better said. So as Dominic said earlier, the water is present in all of the permaculture zones. So from zone 5 to zone 0 and back again, water moves through all the zones. This is also why we at La Casa Integral have taken it to heart and said, okay, if the water layer is needed in every zone, then we best get best friends with it. So, and as we are learning from nature and working with nature, we need to respect also that we are in a fractal culture. So any small part is represented on a larger scale, and any large pattern can be reduced back to smaller fractals of that same pattern. So either way, if we start in zone 5 or we start in zone 0 or we start with a water cell or we start with a river, we are going to learn what we need to know. So looking at these pictures, of course, you see some patterns and they all have water running through it. Now, what can we do with these patterns? So let's say a watershed. If you look at any watershed within the water cycle that we've seen earlier, you will see that there are several functions taking place. So we're catching water, we're conducing water, water is then stored, and after that water will be distributed. And this is the same for a huge watershed or a smaller watershed, which is also visible in this one leaf, and then even smaller after that, etc. And the quality of our water, the final quality of the water that we will be using, is depending on the quality of each of these elements. So the element that is going to catch our water, the element that is going to conduce our water, the element that will store our water, and the elements that will distribute the water. Maybe I should say components, because we're speaking about a natural element, water. So the functions within our design might be needing components. So catching, conducing, storing, and distributing are important functions that our pattern is taking care of when we talk about the quality of water in the watershed. This is another way of looking at a watershed. This is an image that I've taken from a SlideShare presentation by Lisa De Piano, which talks about water. There's lots of great information there, so if you want to make note of the link, I'm sure you'll find it if you search for it online. So this is a watershed, and it shows us perfectly the divide lines, so that within that watershed, that is all the water that we can work with within this system. And of course, this system is a scaled system, and then we have smaller fractals within this system. And within the watershed, there are a lot of techniques that we can work with to SSS, to sink, spread, slow, spread, sink the water, the famous saying by Brad Lancaster. So if we want to store water and catch it, conduce it, and distribute it, the soil is our biggest deposit, also the cheapest. So restoring, regenerating the sponge that our soil should be is maybe number one of our priorities, or of the tools that we have at hand to actually restore the water cycle. Maybe you are familiar with the scale of permanence. So it is right there at the bottom. We need little energy and little time to change the structure So to change the quality of the soil and come to this spongy soil. And for this, to make our sponge really effective, we have techniques like the keyline design. We have a lot of documentaries that can help us. There are cultural designs that, for example, the Romans and the Andalus culture have implemented in many great areas of the world where they are working with terraces, stopping the water. There is the typical PDC example of the Leus Plateau, where John D. Liu and a team were working for over 10 years, installing lots of vegetation on terraces and regenerating, regreening this area that had completely desertified. So even on a small scale, if we're looking at this little image here from Retro Suburbia, the latest book from David Holmgren, we can actually catch the water, we can distribute it or conduce it, and we can store it in a temporary basin or channel there, and then we can let it go again and distribute it further down the watershed. But the more we do this, move the water through our landscapes, the better effect it will have on the sponge and the more water we will store in our soils, which is the cheapest and the greatest deposit. So we need to get back to filling that deposit so that vegetation can grow on it and we can then have the water cycle kick-started. So this is an image also well known in some of the earlier permaculture designer generation, I would say. Maybe these days this is not so often used anymore in PDCs, but it definitely was in mine. Yeomans and the keyline design, where several water ponds are connected in the landscape. So as soon as we catch and store energy in these ponds, life immediately responds. Even if they are temporary basins, life around it will take place, and we are just helping it along, and abundance is flourishing everywhere. This is a photo as well from Water Stories website. This is the Krameterhof, Sepp Holzer's initial project, where he also had amazing effects and impacts on the landscape just by creating these natural ecosystems, these water bodies in the landscape, and having it move slowly in S-bends through the system, and life was appearing everywhere. So we had a look at the larger pattern of the natural hydrological cycle on the top here, and on the bottom you see some other things appear. Sorry for the Spanish. I hope it's understandable that the top is the natural cycle. I choose this image because it's nice to see it in a circle like this. And then on the bottom one here, we see, oh, hang on, there has been some perforation. We have gone and dug deep wells to perforate the aquifers and get water up. We have maybe done too much of this and extracted too much of this resource that we should not have touched. And now we have water ingress from the sea. That means that salt water is getting into our freshwater deposits. With this water, we are then cultivating food, and we are creating desertification, salinization of our soils. We have contamination, erosions. The city is also contaminating the rivers, etc. So this anthropogenic water cycle is broken. Ouch. This cycle, which is very basic, is actually our personal system. Within that circle, we have a smaller part of that circle. But we are going to do the same in our house, in our homes. We're going to catch, conduce, store, and distribute. So we have incomes or inputs. We will cycle and use water in our homes, in our zone 0, and then we will let it pass through our system, and it'll be an out or a resource, because as the principle says, produce no waste. It will not be waste. It will be used within the water cycle further down the chain. So we need to make sure that this water is as clear as possible and can be an input for another component in our design. So as we are catching superficial water and only rain, preferably, or rivers or lakes in our area, and make them go through our system, we would rather not work with subterranean waters or deep aquifers, although there is such a thing that is known as the transition ethic as well. So maybe we can say, okay, let's use the aquifer water, the deep aquifer water, to install a forest garden or a vegetation that is going to be helpful in restoring the hydrological cycle. But there is a plan to it, you have a vision, and it's only a bridge to make the transition to get back to how it was and how nature will then become abundant again. And as good permaculture designers, we don't see the problem, we see the solution. So this umbrella might well be a rainwater catchment rather than a, oh, it's raining. I remember when I was still living in Belgium, I used to think that a lot. And now I am like, oh, please, where on earth's sake is the rain? So perspectives can change as well. So we're learning more about this element of water, and we're getting better and better friends with it. So we need to also know where we are on the planet and understand our climogram. So these are, again, patterns. We need to know how to read these patterns so that we know what we need when we are catching and storing. How much do we store? What is the time frame that we need to cover when we have no rain? And currently in Catalonia, we are now looking at 8 to 10 months of hardly any rain. So this is the typical Mediterranean climogram. I'm not sure if that is even an English word, but the patterns are common in all of the countries. So you should be able to read these. This is the amount of rainfall, the red line is the temperature, and this is, of course, the calendar of the months of the year. So in a tropical climate, there's lots and lots of rain, July, August, September. Temperature is rather medium, but then when we go to a desertic desert climate, very hot desert climate, we have high temperatures and barely any rains. And this is a climogram for a climate on the Ecuador. So there's lots and lots of rain every month. This is the Amazon or Malaysia or other areas that are like always rainy, and the temperature is always the same. This is also true for the Canary Islands, for example, that the temperature is very much the same, or for the Caribbean. The rain is only in like, for example, Malaysia or the Amazon, where it is always very moist and damp. So also when you are in these climates, you need to be thinking about how are you going to work with these patterns. This is what we see over a time period of maybe 10 to 15 years. Climograms are not a 1-year observation. They are patterns that are a bit larger in scale and longer in time. But the scenarios for the future are not clear to us. There is some climate chaos happening all over the world. So maybe this will not be the same, and this will not just be the summer period of, April, May, June until September that we need to think about. This may well be from February to November, or right now we're seeing actually from last April until now, we've had hardly any rains in Catalonia, in our area. So this is the climate scenario map for Catalonia. And if we look at the colors, the gray area is as in we have not a lot of difference happening, but then the yellows and the darker yellows, they are indicating that in these areas there will be 20 to 25% less rainfall than there has been since 1971. So the last 30 years to 50 years are going to be compared to the next 30 years, and it's going to get less and less and less rainy. So we need to know these kind of things to be able to then design our systems. And earlier we said the quality of the water will depend on the quality of the components within our design. So if we're looking at our homes, we've come right down from the watershed, from zone 5 through all the zones and into our home, zone 1 and zone 0. Zone 0 has a lovely roof on it, but not all the roofs will catch the same amount. So if we really need water in a tank because we have a very long dry period, maybe we want to not have a green roof. It wouldn't probably be green, it would rather be yellow. But we are maybe considering Arab tiling or maybe even metal, so that the water is caught and it immediately goes into the tank and it's not lost. This natural fiber is not going to be the best quality for water catching either. Even the Arab tiles have like a 10% loss, as they say it, before they really fill up and are fully, all the pores are filled with water as well, and the water can start running into any tank. So the quality of our catchment system will make the quality of our final water. So we were talking about the watershed and how the pattern comes down to our homes as well. We've got catchment, now we're conducing it. So we want it to go into a tank. Funnily enough, when we arrived here in our new home since a year and a half, we were very lucky to have a 20,000 rainwater deposit. And it was like fantastic. The house even has rainwater gutters, but the gutters were pointing to the street, to the access of the plot, and not to the deposit. Ouch! So it's one thing to have the conduction, the gutters, for the catchment that is taking place on the roof. It needs to also be conducted into storage. And storage, it will depend on your needs, resources, and limits. There is big tanks and smaller tanks. You may have lots of space, smaller space. You may have a big budget or a very tiny budget, or you may also not need so much, or you may need lots because you have a lot of family members, animals, and crop growing in your system. So it depends, but we are catching, conducing, and storing water to be able to use it for whatever pattern our climate defines. Once within our system, we're now using it, cycling, and there's lots and lots of recommendations from administrations and governments all around the world on please use as little as you can. And maybe you want your toilet water to be grey water because it doesn't need to be so clean, or your laundry can go to the landscape, of course, which is fantastic. Lucky we have these types of designs like Art Ludwig from Oasis Design has shown us. You must definitely make sure your tap is not leaking, and you could put a bucket under your shower head whilst the water is getting hot as well. All this to save water within the home. Fantastic. We are overwhelmed maybe with solutions for lowering our water use in the household, I think. And all in all, at the moment now, we are allowed 90 liters per person in Catalonia for household use. The World Health Organization, the WHO, I think has calculated that 50 liters is a minimum that we would need for our personal hygiene and to actually have dignity in our life. So we have 90 liters currently in Catalonia allowed. I have to say, normally our water use here in our household, and we are always 2 people and half of the time 3 people, we use in total about 120 liters per day, and we shower and we have clean clothes and we eat and we cook and we have a garden that we also water, etc. So how do we get to using less than the indicated 50 liters per day for human hygiene, etc. Well, let's look at that. We can still actually reduce further though, because our footprint is not only in our visible water consumption. The bathing, cooking and the laundry is actually not where we do so much harm, I'm afraid to say. We can do all the saving we want in our homes. It's not going to be the big difference. The invisible water that we consume is a lot more important. So where does that then go? Well, if you look at the world's graphics, there's only about 8 to 10% that is water that we use within our homes in the visible way, like flushing the toilet and cleaning our soils and the floors in the house and washing our dishes, etc. The smallest portion on these graphs is the use of water that we have in our households. The bigger use is in industry and in agriculture. Now it depends on where in the world you are, which of the two are the top users of water in your area. But overall, globally, we can see that agriculture actually uses more water than industry. Still, it doesn't matter which of the two uses more water. What matters is that we can actually decide that they need to be using less water. So there's such a thing as virtual water, which is divided up in blue water, green water and grey water. Blue water is water that's taken out of the rivers to manufacture something. Green water is all the natural water in the soil to grow plants, etc. And our food a lot, because 95% of our food comes from the soil. And then there is grey water, which is contamination and water that is polluted because of the growing and the producing of goods and foods. So the invisible water in our food is sometimes very impressive. As in a cup of coffee will have a lot more water in its production cycle than what you actually have of coffee in your cup. And so it is true for a lot of our food items. So you can look this up and you can see which items you may want to decide to use less of. And when we are talking about meat, for example, there is of course also a huge difference between meat from the industrial sector, industrial agriculture, or meat from regenerative agriculture, which is then actually making the soil into a sponge again, and which may well be using water, but it is also sourcing water. And these are all reflections that we can make and that we can get better at by informing ourselves and by learning and by contrasting information that is out there on the internet as well. So our consumption, our dollar or our euro or our yen is actually the power that we have in our hand to reduce the footprint of everything that we purchase. So we're coming to the out. We've done all we can within our system to cycle and reduce our water needs. So now it's time to let go of the water. Or maybe we don't actually have an out. Because if we want to go for a dry toilet, then there is no wastewater, then there is no black water. So there's all sorts of models. The dry toilet industry has also become an industry. So you can now actually go from the very, this is our own dry toilet. We now only use it for volunteering days because we have another type of installation that we are working with. But there's beautiful toilets now, and you wouldn't even know that they are dry toilets. They have urine separation, and you can look into it. And there's much that can be done now, even in urban settings. This, for example, is an urban setting, an urban installation. This was a restaurant in an old factory building where the toilets were then collected. The excrements were collected in the basement of the building. So everything is possible these days. There's no more excuses. You can even have dry toilets in the city. And if you don't want to go dry, then there are also wet solutions where we work with the black waters, with all of the wastewaters in the house, and we then regenerate and reutilize them. So when I was in Findhorn a couple of years back, I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting Michael Shaw, who showed us the living machine, which is a biodigester effluent regenerator. So Findhorn has about 350 to 400 people living there right now, I think. And in this greenhouse, there are 2 trains of 6 to 8 of these bioreactors that use the water, the effluent that is coming out of the biodigester at the beginning of the system. And the plants are actually regenerating the water. They are taking up all of the nutrients in the water, because we need to see them as nutrients. It is everything that has gone through our bodies. So it's nothing chemical or toxic, or there might be a person that is taking an antibiotics, but hey, life can deal with a lot. So these plants, they can oxygenate the water. The microbiology that lives in symbiosis with these plants right at their roots, they are eating up and gobbling up all the nutrients that come through the water. So in the middle of this system of the living machine in Findhorn, the water is actually already at a quality of where it would be allowed to go into the landscape, because there are some indications and some laws that say there should not be more than, well, this would all be technical terminology, but the system that Michael Shaw showed us here already gets to this level, the legally allowed level, at the middle of the system. They have doubled up on it and doubled up on it again, just in case there is a problem. They can close off one train and work with the other. But at the end of the double long train of bioreactors, they can actually have a little pond where the koi fish are swimming happily, and it's like pristine, crystal clear water that comes out of these 6 or maybe 8, I can't exactly remember now the amount, of ponds with aquatic plants that are doing the work, and they are taking out all the nutrients, making it into biomass, photosynthesizing, clearing the air for us, offering us maybe also building material or fibers to make artisanal products with. So it's a win-win-win system. And we have worked on this at La Casa Integral. We work with a similar system, although we have a few more well, no, actually not more steps. We have different steps. So we don't have a biodigester at the start. We actually work with a worm composting bin, which would be in here. And then after that, we have a aquatic garden bed. So there's aquatic plants in these beds doing the job. This is a recently planted system. This one is already more mature. And then at the bottom, we have a siphon, which is a mechanical bell siphon, which is our pump without electricity. So when this fills up, the water gets sucked out of it and it gets thrown into the landscape, and it can actually travel quite far because of the force behind it. And this is, of course, the advantage we have in our context here. We often work with gravity, and so the water will go down, because this is what the Amoeba sisters have shown us, that water will take the fastest route downhill. And if you don't have the gravity that you can work with, then there are small pumps that you can install as well in the system, maybe solar pumps even, to have the water circulate through your system or through your landscape. But the basis for our systems are the natural processes that take place. And the primary treatment here is a vermicomposting bin. We've taken this idea from Wendy Howard. She has a website which is called vermicompostingtoilets.net. You can get all the information you want on that website. It's just amazing, the amount of information she shares. You can ask for clarification. And so we've worked with her system and we've adapted it somewhat slightly. And of course, experience in the field, there's no permaculture without action, has also shown us how to adjust for certain types of context. But the basic of this filter is wood chip. The worms live in the wood chip. The feces fall into the worm bin. They stay on top of the wood chip. The worms go, "Ooh, lovely." And the water actually just quickly runs down. So the water is, pshing, the poops stay up on top and the water is out down the drain next to, right over to the next phase of purifying, of regeneration. So the water is actually in touch with the feces for this much time, only seconds. So there is not that much contamination happening, whereas in septic tanks or biodigesters, it is like a fermenting of all these bacteria that is taking place, and the water just gets more and more and more charged with all these nutrients and all these bacteria. In this particular system, there is hardly any contact with any possible contaminants. So the water is straight through and the solids stay behind. So in Wendy's system, this goes then to a leaching bed, if you want to call it that. We work with aquatic garden beds. And this is the terrain that we saw earlier on the map, where I showed that we work with the gravity. This is one of the first projects that we worked on a few years ago. It was a slope. Well, the owner is also a regenerative agriculture fan and very, very, very passionate about change in his life. So we got in a few machines. He built a lot of terraces, and on these terraces, we were then able to install the distribution pipes. Remember, we spoke earlier about the pattern in the watershed. We needed to catch, conduce, store, and then distribute it. So, or slow it, spread it, sink it, and we are spreading it through this landscape. So this is the branching pattern, the natural pattern that we are using in our zone 1s. We've come from zone 5 to zone 0, and we have seen that the watershed patterns are the same. And now from zone 0, we're moving out to zone 1, and we are offering this water back to our immediate context with the branching system as we see in nature. So from this almost dead zone, it's also a very harsh soil to work with in our area here. We have come to this lush guild food forest garden. There's lots of fruit and veg growing in this system. There's a lot of technical steps that I'm leaving out, of course, here, like percolation tests, etc. But just to show that it is possible. And this was also a beautiful project in a school, where this was the landscape that we started with, the branching system again, and this was all the grey water coming out of a sink where the children were washing their acroalpanes and their hands, etc. And so this water was kept in the landscape with small half-moon shaped pods, let's say, where the water would then accumulate. The little, I can't think of the English word now, the little, you know what I mean, the little wooden pylons here that were used were actually branches of the mulberry tree, and they also started actually to sprout again with all this water coming into the landscape and being held in place by these barriers. And so now this is already a good few years ago. This is now huge. This is a beautiful dome-shaped shade for the children in the school. The whole hillside is green and regenerated, and just by stopping the water, slowing it down, distributing it over the hillside, sinking it, storing it in the soil, and now a few years later we don't have to do anything anymore. The vegetation itself is the engineer that is making sure that all of this water is being cycled as need be. So our homes can be metabolic homes. We can use grey water, black water, and even if we want to have swimming pools, we live in an area, I'm not so sure about the Finnish context, but we live in an area where there are a lot of swimming pools, even though we are only a couple of kilometers away from the Mediterranean Sea. But if we want to work with nature and work with people's habits, and if they really want to have their swimming pool, then well, at least have a natural swimming pool so that we can have biodiversity created around this water body in your home. So all of these components of our home design will help restore the hydrological cycle that we are just but a fractal of. But if we want to go bigger and scale it out a bit more, we can. This is not just the one home solution. This is work by J. Abrams, Biologic Design in the UK, and these are wetlands that he builds for communities of, I think this was a community of 50 people, but you can scale this up, and in the end, the plants and the soil, they do the work, they regenerate the water, they also offer a home and refuge for so many other species. So it's definitely worth to be using these liters of transition petroleum. I think beautiful work this is by Biologic Design. This is on the left-hand side a agro-tourism hotel that we have installed a system for. 20 people's wastewater goes through this aquatic garden bed and then waters the garden. This is a property of a community of properties, rather, 93 apartments right at the seaside here in our community that we are now helping to keep this land green. And of course, the first thing we are saying to them is that grass is maybe not the best vegetation to have in a Mediterranean context. So we are actually putting some data to the community of these apartment owners. And we are seeing that just by putting numbers in front of people, reality hits home. Because these are things that you don't think about when we are so disconnected from nature and so far away from the natural cycles. When all we have to do is open a tap and see the water come out, we just have no realization of where has this come from, how long has it taken to get here, who and what has had to happen for this to be possible at all. So we put these two graphics in front of the community of owners, and it's just comparing volumes, resources and limits, as we would say when we are making an analysis in our permaculture design. So the resources on this side, we have in orange rainwater, pluvials. We have in lilac the regenerated water, water that we can actually regenerate from the grey water, from the kitchen, from the showers, from the washing machines, etc. This is the total amount of water that we could use without having to open the tap, as in deep aquifers, or go for desalinated water, because that is the origin of the water in our towns here. So that's the amount of water that we could have. This is the amount of water that is needed. These two columns do not match up. It's as simple as that. It's showing people that your domestic house use is too high, your watering of your garden is way, way, way too high, and your pool is using a little bit as well, and you are in front of the sea. This, of course, said with the best of intentions, with a lot of care. We need to care for the people. Everybody is a person. Not everybody has this knowledge, has received this knowledge, but I'm sure that deep down everybody wants to do the best. And if they see these numbers, like if we tell them in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, in the autumn, that's how much water we can regenerate. The green line is the best use for your landscape. The orange line is what your landscape is actually currently using. Well, they are not the same, so you need to come down with your landscape consumption. So as permaculture designers, we can then say, thank you for hiring us for your water design. Lucky for you, we are systemic designers and we can actually help you with changing your vegetation and your garden design as well. Not alone that, we can also help you with changing some habits within your home and look at your personal resilience as well. So needs, resources, limits, these are all factors that we need to look at. And as soon as we tell people this in the nicest of ways, a lot of them are like, wow, I never understood this. And then they want to do the right thing. And when we're talking about wanting to do the right thing, I think there is no way of speaking about water design and broken water cycles without actually mentioning that we need to be designing for the 90% as much as for our own class and our own privileged context, because there is a lot of people that is looking at this context where they actually have no water other than the water from a contaminated stream. And this device that this woman is drinking through, the Life Straw, maybe you know it, is an appropriate technology with a carbon filter that actually could be made by somebody there. There could be made sand filters. We don't have to depend on large desalinating plants or energy guzzling installations like osmosis machines, etc. This is my water filter at home, which is also a electricity less and a stainless steel installation. It's all mechanical. You put water in the top and it goes through these filters of, I think it is compressed coconut shell, which is a waste stream product from the palm oil industry. So hopefully they will no longer be available soon, but now that they are, let's make use of them. And then in the bottom recipient is my drinking water, which is 99.8% free of any naughtiness and anything that could make me sick. So I am happily drinking this since like now over 10 years already. So resilience needs to be thought of in our design, and justice as well, I think. So with this, I would say water is life. I hope I've sparked a bit of interest in getting to know your water cycle better and becoming best friends with your water buddies, and knowing what water does in your system and what you can actually do to help repair things. Thank you.
Thank you, Aline, for your deep look into the topic water. Amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, God, I've taken a long time. Sorry, I can never make it short. I always think I'm gonna speak less now, but it's such a passionate topic for me, and I think it is something that we all have to hand. So it's not like, oh, maybe some deeply complicated technological energy system. No, it's water every day. We cannot get away from it. So it's all around, and sorry, I just love it.
Yes, I agree. One of my diploma designs was about water. We kind of noticed here that the dry season is also extending here. It's not a much, it's like 2 months, but it's in the crucial time where the plants start growing. So we had to do something for that. And then yes, the 3S or the 4S come in and that already helps kind of to think about how to slow spread, sink, store water.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you talked about living machines by Jack and is it John Todd? I think they created the system in Findhorn. And I'm also very happy that you talked about Jay Abrams' designs. So yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pioneers out there who are doing great work, and it's just crazy sometimes when I think about how come these systems are not everywhere. What is stopping us? Why is legislation so slow in letting us do things like this? Maybe because it's sometimes dangerous and nobody wants to take responsibility for public health. I don't know. But
various
another consideration actually that has just come to mind now when you said here we only have like a 2-month dry period. Well, the same is true, of course, for Belgium, my home country, where there is a lot of rain and people are like, we don't have to think about water design because, we have so much rain. But wait, it is one of the most densely populated countries in Europe, and it is very heavily industrialized. So it stops raining in Belgium. They have water for 3 months. That's it, no more. So again, the realization of these cycles and these things happening around you. You see water all the time, it's raining all the time, but you don't realize how much is being pulled out of the system at a faster rate. And so even there, it's maybe harsher, because here we've had a drought now for 3 years, and they have waited 3 years to call the emergency. In Belgium, they wouldn't get to 3 months before they would need to call the emergency. So we need to look at it from all angles and learn how to get this holistic and systemic glasses on. So yeah, it's...
Yeah. For the industry, that's kind of a difficult task to do. I was just looking into the water consumptions of server farms, because server farms, they have two numbers. This is the power utilization effectiveness, and then also the water utilization effectiveness. But all the big hosters are only talking about power utilization effectiveness. So when you go to Google and want to find out how effective their server farms are, they give you a number somewhere above 1.5, 1.05 or something like that. But they never talk about how much water they are using for cooling. So
yeah. Well, same thing with the blind spot when we're talking about the carbon emissions. Oh, climate change, and we need to store carbon in the soil, and carbon is the worst greenhouse gas. Well, it's actually only at 25%, I think, and the other 75% is water vapor. So we need to be able to get that water vapor back into the hydro cycle and have it precipitate and have it rain, rather than water vapor being all hot up in the air and catching even more calories. So this is also, I'm not a scientist and I cannot for the life of me remember how many calories. I think 500 calories, but I can't remember for how many drops of water. But it's something that I need to get better at, as in, I know water is key. I just feel it, and there's so many people doing such great work. So hopefully I'll be able to become a better communicator as well for the cause. And we're definitely learning more and more with all the wastewater as well, where, of course, the easiest way of solving the problem is a solution. The problem is contamination. Well, stop contaminating.
I got a very personal question. Why are you not using a biodigester in the first stage? Why is it the vermicomposting? What was the decision behind it?
Well, the biodigester, as for example in Findhorn, is one, it was very smelly, which shouldn't be, I think, but biodigesters often are like, very smelly. I wouldn't want that right by my house. But then also the second reason is because it is a closed system, and again, this water is then very, very heavily charged with nutrients, whereas we feel that it is then in need of more purifying. Hence, the long train of bioreactors of little ponds in the living machine, because the water is so charged. It's a long time in the digester before it comes out. In the system that we have now preferred installing, but we also, when people want gas, for example, we say, hey, the option is there. We've consulted for a campsite, and they were projecting a big restaurant on site. And the cook said, I need to cook on gas. No way can I cook electric. I need gas. Well, make the installation with a biodigester. Great. But in our case, we find that we need a lot more space then to purify the water. And in a lot of our suburban contexts, we don't have that space. So the garden bed can be a lot smaller because the water is not so contaminated. So if you would work with a normal septic tank, which are here legally accepted, it works up to 18 months, 2 years, and then the tank is full. So then you either need to work with the overflow, which is very heavily charged in these DBOs, and you then also have all the sediments, the lodos in Spanish, I think sediments, right, in English. So the truck needs to come and take the sediments out of the tank so that you can fill it up again, because the solids, they don't get work done if you don't put in a load of microbiology. They just heap up.
Okay.
And you need to get rid of them. So these are two things that we thought, like, hang on, this is not a solution, because you still need a truck with a big energy footprint to come and take away this waste and take it to the local purifying plant with its big footprint. In our system, in the vermicomposting system that Wendy Howard and a lot of other people also online are sharing about, VermiFilter is another website, you actually don't have this waste. You don't ever need to fill the vermicompost, because the worms are not only eating your feces, but also they are going through the wood chip slowly. The wood chip is also disintegrating because of the water. There is toilet paper. So this is all becoming humus, like I think you say the same in English, right? The vermicompost.
Yep.
And this then gets washed through with the water. And after 6 months, a year, you open the box and you say, oh, hello, everybody. You need some more wood chip then. And you fill it up again. There is never any waste.
Okay. So in Finnish context, I think neither the biogas system nor their vermicomposting will work, because they all need to be on temperature.
Yes, though, yes, because both the biodigester, I've also taken courses on the biodigesters because we also want to work with them. And I have seen many case studies of iced up and snowed under areas where they actually half put them in the ground, the biodigester. And for the vermicomposting here, for example, we have made the tests. Our vermicompost is on the west side of the house, and it gets very, very hot. It gets up to over 40 degrees. You do not want your worms in that heat. We've put a straw bale wall in the middle, and on the other side, it's 15 degrees less. So the same could be done for cold. So you can insulate the vermicompost, or if you have a house with a basement, the vermicompost could be in the basement and warm and cozy. And then from there, you take the water to the outside. So everything is designed. There's no standard. I couldn't give you here, buy the design and copy it. No, it all needs to be adapted to context.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But very interesting, and indeed, sometimes I do forget that there is a whole load of other contexts and climates and of course, when we have people who are very passionate about wanting to make the change in their house, and then they come and tell us, oh, we have no space at all, we are frustrated. And so now we are designing and trying to innovate. My partner is crazy about urban solution, and he wants to offer something to probably one of the biggest challenges of our times. So he wants to go vertical with it. Who knows what will come out of that? Because if we need to work with big facades in the city, maybe we can do something.
Yeah,
We're getting there. Yeah. We need to all think together. So hopefully we can get the hive mind going on these types of solutions.
Any questions here? Humia, you got anything? Lily, anything?
Yes, actually, yeah. Hi, thank you very much for the interesting and very passionate presentation. I very much enjoyed it. It was very good.
Thank you.
I was just thinking, like, how are the people now in Catalonia and Spain kind of reacting to the emergency, or like, are you seeing a change in the willingness of think about these different kinds of solutions and holistic solutions, or is it still, are people like putting their head in the sand, so to say?
Well, I cannot generalize, of course. I think we never should generalize. But we, as a designers cooperative, we are a business of permaculture designers. We are seeing the work. It's coming up from all sorts of people and contexts and interests, and so it's fabulous to see that we have a lot of work. Sometimes it's like, oh no, I didn't want to be this stressed as a permaculture designer. But you know, we're trying to also open the door and train more people and get more people on the team. And the general feeling right now of I think of citizens needing to change is a little bit like what I said in the presentation, as in our domestic use is so little. Really, where you need to be going to make the changes is in the industry. And a lot of people are very angry. I don't know if you have had manifestations from farmers in your area, but here in Barcelona, they blocked the city on the island of Mallorca, where I still go often because I co-founded the association Permacultura Mediterránea on Mallorca. Palma was also filled with farmers with tractors because they are angry, because these areas, they depend on tourism a lot. The biggest industry is tourism. And only last year I was in a hotel in Barcelona because I was invited to give a talk at the Green Building Council in Barcelona. I was in a LEED certified hotel, and there was not one single mention about the water situation. So this is really, really sad. So you can only then expect that citizens are like, don't come and knock on my door. You are really focusing on the wrong people here. It's probably lobby. There is probably a lot of money involved. But I think that even within the farming and agriculture industry, the comments that I have heard, and I am not deeply into it, but I have heard that the organic and regenerative farmers were standing by the side of conventional farmers because of that same goal. So it was beautiful to see that at least within the community of people who are cultivating our food, be it the right way or be it the destructive way, they were finding common ground in, hey, this is a bit crazy. We need to be more helped and supported and respected. A lot of people from conventional agriculture also want to make the change, but it's just made impossible by bureaucracy, legislation, taxes and lists that they need to tick off, etc. So I think we are seeing a bit of a revolt, and that the government is going to need to respond to this. So hopefully we're on that way up, you know, where we're reaching the tipping point, and then soon it'll just be woohoo, we're home free. Well, not quite there yet, but I feel there is something in the air and people are really wanting to make the change.
Yes, well, that sounds good. I also have some friends in Catalonia and Spain, and it's yes, they do worry a lot about the situation, and hopefully it can be helped. And then there's us who we get all kinds of vegetables and fruits from Spain in the
Yeah.
winter time here, which don't grow um, here in the winter or not at all. And it's like, yes, we see it too, we feel it too with every tomato and cauliflower.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly. That was the point I was going to make. Like it's not just the problem of the Spanish people, because actually Spain is the greenhouse of Europe. And also in my family in Belgium, over the last few years, their interest has grown in my permaculture work because it was first, oh, but you have a crisis in Spain. You need to be thinking about these things. And now they realize that indeed the tomato on their plate comes from the supermarket, comes on a truck from Spain. So they need to be thinking about what is happening in our area. They need to help change the water cycle with their choice in the supermarket. And if it is too expensive, because I totally understand everybody's context, and I think that we need to look at climate justice in this way as well, that people on the street don't need to be paying for these changes. This is, I think, where the farmers are indeed in their right to say, hey, we want to make the transition, but it should not be so expensive for us to become organic and regenerative, because we need to then ask the buyer to pay this. So it's one of these dances. No, I don't know if you're familiar with Donella Meadows' Dancing with Systems. We're dancing who's taking the first step, what's next, and what will come out of it, what will emerge. It's organic as nature, but we just have to hopefully go in the right way and work with the patterns that we understand, because I'm sure that there's many, many, many that I don't understand yet. So I'll keep studying.
Yes, yes, it's such a vast field. Just any bits and water and every all of them, they are their own systems. And then yeah, I like the dancing idea. It's very
Yeah.
cool. Like
Yeah.
going upstairs, no? So you can only move your right foot and your left foot after each other. Now, if you only move your left foot, it's gonna start be painful very soon. Go up the
Yes.
stairs.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, we're all connected in it. So, yeah. Well, thanks for these kind of interactions and platforms and times to share and to think across the boundaries. Because, yeah, indeed, of course, it's very different over there for you than to where I am, and that is enriching.
Yes, it's very true, and I think it's very important to have this kind of pan-European understanding. I feel we are still in the same boat, even though we have some different bioregions and we have some yeah, we have. Well, we'll see what will happen with our water. I don't. There will be probably not a scarcity of water in Finland for a very long time, but it will start. It will change. We've already been seeing it, that it's been snowing way more than was first thought. So we have lots and lots of snow. We've had quite extensive, even on our village, we just have pretty extensive greenhouse damage, and there's been quite big greenhouse damage due to the snow loads in Finland this year. And so we will see what it happens in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years until this winter precipitation turns into water. But it's a different challenge.
Yeah, the extremes, they are not just seen within one bioregion, more extreme events, but also across the regions. The extremities are going more drought in Spain and more snow and floods in the northern countries. So, yeah, well, we'll have to adapt our designs as we go along.
Yes, that's true.
But meanwhile, I think we can do a lot by trying to mitigate still and hope for a natural reaction that we don't understand or can't predict. Because as with the feedback loops that we are now seeing, the positive feedback loops that are unpredictable as well, well, hopefully we can get into some negative feedback loops and get it all calmed down again by just walking in the right direction together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.